My boss fired me for refusing to sleep with him. He expected me to go quietly because the promotion I had been promised had been his currency for asking. What he did not know was that our HR department already had 3 other complaints about him from previous years, all of which had been buried by the same executive who had hired him. I worked at a regional sales office for a consumer products company. I had been there for 2 years, and my boss was a regional vice president named Douglas. Douglas was in his mid-50s, married, and had a reputation within the office for making comments to junior women that made people uncomfortable. When I joined the company, a colleague had warned me to be careful around him. I had thanked her and tried to keep my interactions professional. For the first year, this was fine. Douglas and I worked together on a few accounts, and he was supportive of my work. In the second year, when the senior account manager role opened up, Douglas told me I was a strong candidate. He said the decision would be his. He mentioned, offhandedly, that he liked working with candidates he could spend more time with. I ignored the subtext and kept working. In the spring of that year, he invited me to dinner to discuss the promotion. He said we could meet at a restaurant near his hotel, as he was traveling through town for meetings. I went on the assumption this was a formal evaluation dinner. It was not. Over dinner, he told me plainly that the promotion was mine to take, but that I would need to be flexible about how we spent time together when he was in town. He was specific about what that meant. He tried to make the transaction sound casual, as if it were a normal part of how decisions got made. I declined politely. I told him I was interested in the role on the merits and nothing else. I thanked him for dinner and left early. I walked to my car and recorded, into my phone's voice memo application, everything he had said. I did this from memory within 10 minutes of leaving, while it was still fresh. I did not file a complaint immediately. I wanted to see what he would do next. Over the next month, my work was increasingly criticized. Projects I had been on were reassigned. In one case, a client I had been managing was transferred to another account manager without explanation. A review I had expected to go well was instead negative, in terms that did not match the specific feedback my actual clients had given me. Then the senior account manager role was announced, and it had been filled by a different candidate. The candidate was a man named Patrick. I had trained Patrick. He had been at the firm 6 months. His sales numbers were roughly a third of mine. I asked Douglas for feedback. He said with a small smile that team dynamics and cultural fit had weighed heavily. He said I was still young and that there would be other opportunities. A week later, he placed me on a performance improvement plan based on the negative review he had written himself. The plan had targets designed to be impossible to meet. When I missed them, as predicted, I was terminated. I left the office on a Friday afternoon. I went home. I called an attorney recommended by a family member. My attorney was methodical. She asked me for a complete timeline. She asked about witnesses. She asked about my voice memo. She asked, specifically, whether I was aware of any other women who had made complaints about Douglas. I was not, but I mentioned the colleague who had warned me on my first day. My attorney contacted her. That colleague, now at a different company, agreed to speak to my attorney privately. She told my attorney she had filed a complaint about Douglas 3 years earlier, which had been resolved informally by the same executive who had originally hired him. She named 2 other women she knew of who had filed similar complaints. My attorney, through formal discovery, obtained the HR records. There were, as it turned out, 3 prior complaints about Douglas over a 7-year period. All 3 had been informally resolved by the same executive, who had apparently worked with Douglas at a previous company. None had ever been formally investigated. None had been disclosed to the board. The case did not go to trial. It settled. I am not at liberty to discuss the specific terms. As part of the resolution, Douglas was terminated for cause. The executive who had repeatedly buried the complaints was also terminated. The company instituted a new policy, effective across all offices, that any complaint of harassment involving a senior executive would be escalated to an independent committee that did not include any executive who had worked with the accused at a prior firm. I was reinstated with full back pay, a promotion to a regional role that was actually a step up from the one I had been denied, and a transfer to a different office where I would not report to anyone in Douglas's chain. I worked at the new office for 4 more years before leaving for a better role elsewhere. Here is what I learned. Men like Douglas rarely have just one victim. They have patterns, and the patterns exist in HR files that most of the women he targets never see. When your own complaint feels like it is being buried, ask whether it is the first one. Often, it is not. An attorney with discovery authority can find the others. And when the pattern becomes visible, companies move quickly to protect themselves, even at the cost of the people who had been shielding him. Have you ever had to file a harassment complaint? Tell me in the comments.